Hi folks, welcome back to The Scoop. We're broadcasting live from the Experiential Marketing Summit here at the MGM Grand Hotel and Casino Resort in beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada. It is a gorgeous Friday morning here in the desert, and I am so excited to be joined by our next guest. I want to get right to this and introduce Phil Duncan, the Chief Design Officer of one of the most storied global brands, P&G, and just the house of brands that you have built. Phil, welcome to The Scoop. It's so great to have you on the program.
Thanks so much for having me, Steve. It's a real privilege to be on The Scoop, so looking forward to our conversation.
Oh,
so
I've been looking forward to this all week, and I know you just got in yesterday to
Yes.
EMS. How have you enjoyed the event so far?
I mean, it's been really terrific. I mean, just to get a sense of the talent that's in this industry, to reconnect with people live, to get that sense of energy again. So it's been really terrific. It's been a real privilege. This is my first time coming to this conference, and so I will be a repeat offender.
Fantastic. Well, we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of EMS. I know they will be thrilled that you're coming back next year. And
Yes.
we hope to be here with The Scoop as well, and maybe we can repeat our segment next year.
We'll look forward to it.
In this moment, let's get into it. Now, Phil, I know that you've got a keynote session coming up a little bit later today. We don't want to steal any of your thunder for folks who are here in Vegas and looking forward to enjoying that session, but we've got a big audience right now watching our segment. Love for you to just give a little bit of a preview and maybe some of the highlights of what you might share in your keynote today.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, when I was asked to kind of come and talk and share some of our thoughts as a company, what we've really been through, not just in the past couple of years, but really, and you and I had this conversation about how do we go about building brands for the long term.
Yes.
And how do we stay focused on what matters to the consumer, regardless of whether the situation is face-to-face, whether that's digital, whether that's virtual. So I'll talk a lot about some of the things that are remaining the same in the context of how we go about building our brands and businesses, remaining consumer focused, ensuring that we're delivering superiority of choice for them, solving something that's really a tension in their lives, and building a really terrific experience. And then of course I'll lean in and talk a little bit about the agility and kind of the demonstration of how we've had to integrate new technologies and means by which to continue to do that, even through some of the unbelievable disruptions that I think the world's been through in the past couple of years. So.
Absolutely. No, well said, and I know folks here, some of us are going to be able to attend that session.
Oh.
We're excited for that.
That's good.
Exactly. If we can get in, I hear it's standing room only.
Yeah, if only, but okay, you're flattering me.
Very good. Now, Phil, I want to touch on a little bit, as Chief Design Officer at P&G, help our audience understand, what does that role entail? What are some of your key responsibilities as Chief Design Officer?
Sure, well, I've been massively privileged to be in this role now for a little over 14 years, which is kind of unbelievable. So
Wonderful.
I've seen a lot, right?
Yes.
And at our foundation, I think the design team at P&G is really responsible to remain kind of energetic and focused on building superior product and package designs, right? So if our team isn't kind of at the foundation of that, we have an issue, right? And we think about how we grow and build our brands. We understand that having superiority in things like product design, package design, communications, a retail experience, whether that's physical or virtual, all those things add up to understanding how we go about growing our business, right? So at its core, that's our kind of foundation. Of course, over the course of the past decade, right? As Chief Design Officer, we've been bringing in new talent and new skills.
Wonderful.
UX, UI, virtual skills.
Sure.
And so that's been another big part of my role, is to ensure that we have the right talent to meet the business need as it's been shifting. And then the last piece, there's a accountability and responsibility that I think as we have as a company and as a design team, to reflect the consumer that we serve. And interestingly, the design industry is not terribly diverse.
Is that right?
And so one of the things that we've been very focused on is not only inside of our walls, but how do we also instill a sense of opportunity within the design industry as a means for any person to achieve what their kind of professional career or their objectives might be. So
wonderful.
Those are some key spaces where I spend a lot of time, and then of course I lean in on big places where we build experiences where the company comes to life and really demonstrates its innovation story, or it demonstrates our principles and values as a company. So CES being one,
Sure.
Olympics being another. Things that I did not anticipate actually being as part of my role when I joined the company to do this job 14 years ago.
Right.
But it's been a real privilege for me to be able to be a part of, and to bring the design team and the talents within it to help the company really express itself meaningfully in those environments.
That's terrific, Phil. I'm struck by how comprehensive design affects all aspects of what you do at P&G. My uninitiated brain might think it's only packaging,
right?
But you've described a very broad spectrum of where design influences the engagement with the consumer, those touch points with the consumer through a variety of channels and so forth.
Absolutely.
You guys are integral to obviously to the success of the overall organization. How do you measure your success in terms of the design impact in these various components?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think you're very insightful, being a design neophyte.
Thank you. My production team gave me the
there
insight.
you go. Right? Because we often sit at the intersection with our R&D and our brand organization, or our IT and our brand organization, and so.
Sure.
And ultimately, I think we are at our best and doing our finest work as we help those teams translate their ideas into artifacts, right? So I like to say our superpower is to take all that strategy, all that thinking, all that upstream innovation, all that chemistry, and bring it to life. Nice. So it's something that the consumer can then respond to and go, oh, wow, I need that in my life.
Yes.
I want that in my life, right? And so, at its core, I think that's what we really are focused on within the organization, as the ability to help us envision the future, bring the ideas and possibilities to life, experiment. So we were really big in helping the organization to embrace principles of lean innovation.
Oh, wonderful.
So things like rapid prototyping of ideas, so we can get out to the consumer and see if it's resonating in some way, or if it's if it's not.
Right.
And we need to kind of go back in and rethink that.
Fail fast, right?
Fail fast,
yes.
Absolutely. And through the use of things like prototyping and utilizing the talent within the design team, our teams are able to move much faster, much quicker, bring the idea to life, get a sense that the consumer is really going to respond to it, and then keep moving.
Fantastic. So. And I'm curious, P&G is, of course, one of the storied brands globally. I apologize, I don't know exactly how long you've been in business, but it's over 100 years, certainly.
Almost to 1837.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And
so,
I can't do the quick math on camera.
100 and something, over 100 and almost 90 now, I think.
Oh my gosh. So you must innovate to remain as successful as you've been for that long. And the process you just described for failing fast, innovating, trying new things, did that come as a bit of a cultural shock within P&G, or was that something that felt natural for the organization?
I think innovation has been a lifeblood of our company since the very beginning. And earlier segment when you all were blowing bubbles in here, I'm like, that brings me home. We're a soap and candle company at our heritage, so I thank you for that intro. But it absolutely has always been a big part, and we believe that brands can endure for decades, right?
Yes.
And many of our brands have. I will say over the course of the past decade, though, we found ourselves not delivering the kinds of results that we would necessarily have liked, or the street would have liked us to be delivering.
Right.
So we really needed to re-examine how we were going about innovating. And that's where, as you and I briefly chatted, some things, embracing the constructs behind lean innovation.
Yes.
Which is really about building the prototype, getting fast cycle learning, and transactional learning. So we're really asking the consumer, would you pay for this proposition?
Yes.
Not just do you like it, right? Short cycles where small teams, dedicated teams on that innovation are running through learning cycles and having the freedom to go learn and explore against a certain set of parameters and kind of KPIs or metrics that then say you're succeeding. And that has been a huge shift in our company. Whereas before we might have had I'll call them dozens of experiments out in the market. We now have hundreds of
Wow.
experiments running across all of our businesses as we really are embracing this notion of lean innovation.
Incredible. I love how you describe lean innovation, and I can't help but see the connection to agile development from the technology world. It seems very similar in terms of, get out there, try things quickly, get these teams focused on innovation, support them, give them the space they need to find the next insight or the next great thing. Do you feel a connection there?
Oh,
in
for
terms of
sure.
that?
We had some wonderful people on our board, in our leadership space. I'll mention one, Scott Cook. He was the founder of Intuit. He sat on our board for a long time and led our innovation subcommittee. And he just taught us so many great lessons and opened the doors to his organization on how they were going about developing, innovation and utilizing rapid prototyping of ideas, literally hundreds overnight. You could do that in a technology world. And at first, I think we felt like, how do we replicate that? We're a consumer packaged goods. But again, through the use of, yes, a lot of people, but at the core, I'm the chief design officer, so I got to give my team a little shout out.
Of course.
Doing that notion of rapid prototyping of ideas, getting the idea quickly to the consumer, seeing if they're interested in the transaction, and then learning and iterating and going from there has been a huge enabler for us to really put those hundreds of experiments in the marketplace to learn from.
It's fantastic, and I really appreciate the value you place on different perspectives and bringing in Scott Cook's perspective, and I assume other board members and other stakeholders who are involved in that. It's been one of the themes we've been exploring here on The Scoop is the value of different perspectives,
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
it's so important.
We try to solve, the world is full of complex issues.
Yes.
Complex issues take complex and varied thinking in order to resolve. So it's imperative as you put your team together to put people with very different mindsets, very different skills, very different backgrounds to the task.
Yes.
Only through that will you, I think, find the optimal solution. So couldn't agree with your comment more.
Wonderful. Folks, if you're just joining us here on The Scoop, I'm sitting down with Phil Duncan, Chief Design Officer with P&G. Phil, it's so great to have you here, and we're in the excitement of this great event. For me personally, this is my first in-person event, sort of coming out of the pandemic. How has the experience of the last 2+ years been at P&G? What have been some of the impacts and challenges you've had to go through, and as we emerge out of this pandemic, fingers crossed,
right, yes.
What's the thinking and mindset across P&G coming out of this period of time?
Yeah, well, I mean, gosh, resiliency would be a big theme of the past 2 years. Oddly, I'd say maybe even scenario planning and not necessarily having just one thing that you are, I can talk about how, and I will talk later today a little bit about how we were obviously very excited about what the impact that CES was having on our storytelling as a company and helping us build our innovation reputation. But then to have it, rug and pull, not just once, and then unfortunately did that twice. And then we've also had that happen on major platforms like the Olympics. So, call me a fool. What's the saying? Fool me once, whatever. Fool me twice, and then then it's right. So I think one, having resilience and a clear sense of focus and priorities. And our going into the pandemic or early parts of the pandemic, we realized that we needed to keep our people safe first and foremost.
Wonderful.
Because we also understood that the world would benefit. As part of our own kind of mission and values, from having health, hygiene, cleaning products in their home so that they can manage and go through this situation. But we couldn't deliver those to people if our own people were not, being protected and being able to keep safe.
Of course.
So we had a lot of work to do on how to build our own protocols and enable our own employees to get into the work, particularly in the manufacturing and product supply spaces, where we have tens of thousands of amazing people who quite literally put their life on the line to make, pack, and ship, as we called it, those products for people to consume. So we learned a lot through that. We learned fortitude, resilience, and then I think as we came through, we also learned how to be innovative. I mean, we learned innovation at its absolute core. Like, how do we deal with different supply chain disruptions in quite creative and interesting ways? So the future for us is, really strong. But I think the lessons of what we've learned, the disruptions that we went through, I think will certainly stick with us as we continue to look to how to grow our business. So, we're a company that believes in a mantra of being a force for growth and a force for good.
Love that.
And so, but we know we've got to grow that in order to do good. And so our focus is on, again, how do we continue to do that, but also show up and be a force for good. You and I talked briefly about the importance of spaces like sustainability.
Yes.
And every single one of our businesses is laser focused on how to continue to deliver that same kind of superiority that consumers want from our brands
And
whatever,
expect, yes.
and expect, at the same time as developing much more sustainable solutions. And that is a design thinking challenge, conundrum,
I'm
bringing
sure.
those solutions, seemingly at times very incongruent thoughts together.
Yes.
But how can you deliver the combination of that? But it's something that we're deeply, deeply committed to.
I can feel the passion that you personally have for
Yeah.
that, and that the organization brings to that topic. And there's so many different ways that we could kind of take this. I want to focus a little bit on some of the next generation of consumers. There's a lot of talk here at EMS about Gen Z, right?
Yes, right.
I guess the millennials had their time. We're not as interested in them anymore. We love you, millennials, don't worry. But Gen Z now, maybe a different cohort coming on board. And how does that affect the way that you think about the positioning of your brands, the design of experiences, how to attract new consumers who, maybe they don't know about P&G and the brands that you had for so long. Does that influence the way that you go to market?
I mean, absolutely, and 10x that, right?
Right.
I think at the foundation, we always have believed and understood that the number one way to build a business is to continue to bring in new users to your brand or your franchise, right? So staying committed to understanding where those consumers are potentially going to come from. What are the tensions in their life? What are their expectations that they have for a business or a brand? So, and then where are they? I mean, I think it's very interesting. There's so much more now about going out into communities, going out into where people already exist and being relevant versus believing that they're going to come and want to hear a story about Tide or want to hear a story about Gillette. That's a yes, but we need to be out in those communities where they are and showing up in relevant ways. It's why our businesses like Gillette, for example, are big into spaces like gaming.
Right.
It's not only a huge audience, but it's a huge relevant audience, and we can show up in those environments with a relevant message, particularly around the brand and business remaining innovative and what we're doing in that space. So I think we're trying to make sure we're meeting where the kind of the newer or younger consumers are spending their time and meeting them there.
That's fascinating to me. The shift from the consumer should come to us as the brand to, no, we're going to go where they are and where they exist. We heard similar refrain in my piece with Cliff Regano from Jägermeister yesterday. They do a lot in the community and kind of local engagement space. Does that require different skill sets of a brand to engage at that level?
For sure.
Yeah.
I think you still need to be very clear about what you want your business or brand to stand for. Have your who and your what really clear, if you will.
Sure.
But it's the how and the context that is dramatically changing how we show up. So it's just, I think it's in it also for people who are a bit longer in the tooth in their career. Well, I will admit that.
Hey, me too.
But it reinforces the importance of being open to learning, keeping your curiosity high.
Yes.
I mean, I would have never have imagined that I would be on a stage talking about the Metaverse 3 years ago. But we leaned in. I learned. We did it. We still have a lot to learn about the future in that space, but. It's been a fantastic area for us to begin to explore where our consumer is going to be in the future and how do we credibly show up with our business and brands in those environments.
Right. It strikes me, Phil, that there may have been a time at P&G where they wouldn't have taken the risk to do something like the Metaverse. Is that a fair statement? Or has the business always been willing to look at new places to find growth and find the next consumer?
Maybe so. I can appreciate how some might think about that from looking from the outside in. But if I really go back in the history of our company, I mean, we were the first to use things like dare I say, but radio.
Yes.
We developed the first soap opera as a platform
Of
by which
course.
to talk about our brands. And so, then we, of course, then we're into advertising, and then we were into digital and social media, what have you. And now the Metaverse is just one more platform that we, as marketers and events and experience builders, are going to have to go out into and go, all right, so what does this mean for us?
Right.
What is the opportunity in here? And if people are really going to show up there, well, we need to as well. And what's the rules for engagement out there? So I'm personally super excited about it. But it just is another evolution, and I think we acknowledge that, and now we're off in a really interesting learning journey with it.
Absolutely. So I want to shift a little bit, although it's just a kind of an adjacent shift. We've been talking a lot with folks here at EMS about, as we come out of the pandemic, what's the future mix of engagement with consumers? Do they want to be in person? Are they looking for digital experiences? Is it episodic? Is it continual, sort of always-on engagement? What are the strategies you're focused on as we come out of this sort of 2-year experiment, and how do we maintain our connection with our community and consumers? What are you guys thinking about in terms of that balance of engagement modalities, if you will?
I think our biggest strategy is to embrace learning and constant learning, and then, as I had mentioned earlier, a little bit of versatility and agility. There will always be a moment when a consumer just cannot appreciate the benefits of a Gillette exfoliating razor without using the Gillette exfoliating razor. I can gamify it all I want. I can whatever. But at some point, I want to feel what this thing is, right?
I could probably use one right now, Phil.
Well, I wasn't going to judge, Steve, but I'm just saying. But anyway, no. But then, last year at CES, we launched in the Metaverse Beauty Sphere, which was how to bring to life our responsible beauty strategy at P&G through the portfolio of our beauty brands.
Wonderful.
And it was fantastic. Beautiful. And it engaged in storytelling, it engaged in a highly relevant construct to learn about our businesses and brands. So it sounds cliche, but I think it's going to be a yes and. And then I think we're learning how to maintain what the relevant context is, and not expect that, again, if I really want the consumer to understand the benefit of the product, I might just have to have him or her use it.
Yes.
Right? But then the digital or social or virtual world gives you a really rich opportunity to tell a different type of story. I mean, when you look at the worlds that we built in the virtual, I'd never be able to afford those in the physical.
Exactly.
And it complements. It can be certainly complement in those kinds. So I think we're learning about all of this for sure.
I love that perspective.
No real principles, I think, yet, except to maintain our focus on the consumer, maintain the superiority of our brands and that experience, and remain context relevant.
Wonderful. Phil, we got about 2 minutes left.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I know you've got to get to your keynote. We don't want to hold you up from that very important
But you did
session.
get the scoop, right? You got the scoop on the keynote.
We did get the scoop on the keynote, and so much more with you here. One final topic I'd love to get your perspectives on. We're hearing a lot here at EMS about diversity, equity, inclusion, being a purpose-driven brand, sort of some of these more cultural competency types of aspects. What's your perspectives on those, and how do those affect the way P&G operates in terms of building your brands and growing the business?
Yeah, well, it's been a commitment of ours since the foundation of our company. We did so many firsts around employee rights and what have you, and if you look at the history of our messages out into different environments, equality and inclusion has been a big part, not only what we talk about externally, but honestly, more importantly, what the actions and behaviors that we've been doing, internally. So it remains a critical component of how we, frankly, both attract talent, but also understand the responsibility that we have to influence the industry in which we work, right? So everything from, we have a great initiative called Widen the Screen, which is largely around how, for example, the entire creative ecosystem can embrace and support people of African ancestry in the industry.
Wonderful.
In front of the camera, behind the camera, how those stories are told. We understand that we play a significant role in shaping that, and so we're deeply, deeply committed. And it's not just for the sake of doing it, but it really is about being a force for growth and then a force for good. If we're not growing as a company, then we cannot be a force for good, but we understand the symbiotic and important relationship between those two dynamics.
Fantastic. I love that message, and I love P&G's leadership in that area. It's so important, given your position globally, that you guys are committed to those great outcomes, and kudos to you guys for that.
Well, thank you. And thanks for having me. It's been a real privilege to be out and about again, and so thank you. Nice to meet you too.
Nice to meet you, Phil, and thank you so much for agreeing to be on The Scoop. This has been a fantastic segment, and frankly, the perfect wrap up to our broadcasting experience here. Folks, we hope you've enjoyed this segment with Phil Duncan, Chief Design Officer with P&G. I know I enjoyed it thoroughly. Can't wait for the on-demand version so I can watch it again.
And a shave.
And a shave, right? I'm going to have to tap in and see if I can get some free product. Thank you.
Okay, fine.
Yeah,
I deserve that.
That's good stuff. Phil, I hope you enjoy your keynote and have a great rest of your experience here at EMS. Travel back safely home, and thank you again for joining us on The Scoop.
My real pleasure.
Fantastic.
Thanks.
Folks, we'll be back to wrap up our broadcasting day here in just a moment. Stick with us. Thanks again, Phil. We'll see you in just a minute.